My granddaughter called me at 11 minutes past midnight. Her voice was barely a whisper, shaking with something I hadn't heard from her since she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. "Grandpa, I need you to come get me. Please. Right now." Before I could respond, I heard a door slam in the background. A man's voice, sharp and angry. Then silence. The line went dead. I was already reaching for my car keys before my heart caught up with what my brain already knew. Something was terribly wrong at the Harrington estate. As a parent, as a grandparent, what would you do if someone you loved called you like that in the middle of the night? I need to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done. My name is Robert Thornton. I'm 62 years old, and for 31 years I served as a Crown prosecutor in Ontario. I put away murderers, fraudsters, and predators of every kind. I thought I understood evil. I thought I knew what monsters looked like. But I learned that night that the worst ones don't look like monsters at all. They look like respectable business people. They look like pillars of the community. They look like the family your granddaughter married into. My wife Eleanor passed away 4 years ago. Complications from a fall at a private care facility where she was recovering from hip surgery. They called it an accident. They called it unavoidable. They offered us a settlement and an apology wrapped in legal documents designed to make the whole thing disappear. My son wanted to take it. He said it was time to move on, that no amount of money would bring his mother back. He was right about the second part, but I couldn't let it go. I hired investigators. I dug through records. I found 17 other families who'd experienced similar accidents at facilities owned by the same company. The resulting lawsuit cost them their license and their reputation. It didn't bring Eleanor back, but it meant she didn't die for nothing. That's the promise I made at her grave. That I would never stop fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. That I would use everything I'd learned in 3 decades of prosecution to make sure the powerful couldn't prey on the vulnerable. I thought I was keeping that promise by consulting on elder abuse cases, by volunteering at legal aid clinics, by speaking at conferences about corporate accountability. I never imagined the next case would be my own granddaughter. Lily had been married for just over 18 months to a man named Jeffrey Harrington. The Harringtons owned a chain of private rehabilitation and long-term care facilities across Ontario and into Quebec. 12 locations, hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Jeffrey was the youngest son, handsome and charming in that way that always made me uneasy. Too smooth, too practiced. His smile never quite reached his eyes. I'd voiced my concerns before the wedding. Lily had accused me of being overprotective, of seeing criminals everywhere because of my career. She'd reminded me that I'd investigated the Harrington facilities after Eleanor's death and found nothing. She was right. I had looked into them. Their record was clean. Too clean, I thought at the time. But I had no evidence, just instinct. So I'd walked her down the aisle, because her father, my son, had passed away in a car accident when she was 12. I'd given a toast about love and partnership and trust. I'd watched her move into the Harrington compound in Muskoka, a sprawling estate on Lake Rousseau that cost more than I'd earned in my entire career. And I'd told myself I was wrong about Jeffrey, that my years of prosecuting criminals had made me paranoid. The drive from my house in Oakville to the Muskoka estate normally took 2.5 hours. That night, I made it in just under 2. The highways were empty, and I drove like a man possessed, which I suppose I was. Eleanor's voice echoed in my head the whole way. The last thing she'd said to me before she went into that facility. "Take care of our girl, Rob. Promise me." I'd failed Eleanor. I wouldn't fail Lily. The Harrington estate sat behind iron gates and a stone wall that ran for nearly a kilometer along the lakefront. I pulled up at 3 minutes past 2 in the morning. The gate was closed, but I knew the code. Lily had given it to me months ago, just in case of emergencies. I'd memorized it without really believing I'd ever need it. The gate swung open smoothly. Every light in the main house blazed against the darkness. They knew I was coming. I parked and walked up the stone steps to the front door. My knee ached from an old injury, a reminder that I wasn't the young prosecutor who'd once chased a suspect 3 blocks through downtown Toronto. But I wasn't frail either. 30 years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer had taught me how to project confidence I didn't feel. The door opened before I could knock. Margaret Harrington stood in the doorway, Jeffrey's mother. Silver hair, perfectly arranged. Silk robe that probably cost more than my car payment. Expression like she was greeting an unwelcome salesman. "Robert." Her voice was ice wrapped in velvet. It's the middle of the night. I know what time it is. Lily called me. I want to see her. She's resting. She's had a difficult evening. Open the door, Margaret. I'm afraid I can't do that. She didn't move. Lily is confused. She's been under tremendous stress. The family is handling it. The family. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She's my family, too. She's my granddaughter. And she's my daughter-in-law. She's in our care now. Margaret's eyes were flat, like a shark's. She's not leaving. The way she said it made every alarm bell in my head go off at once. Not leaving. Like Lily was property. Like she was a prisoner. I stepped forward. Margaret tried to block me with her body. At 62, I was still 6 feet tall and broad-shouldered. She was maybe 5'4" in her slippers. Move. This is trespassing. I'll call the police. Please do. A sound from somewhere above us. A muffled cry. Female. Terrified. Lily. I pushed past Margaret, not gently, and ran for the stairs. She shouted something behind me. Probably threats, probably warnings. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was getting to my granddaughter. The main staircase curved up to a second-floor hallway lined with closed doors. The crying was coming from the far end. I followed it, my old knees screaming in protest, until I reached a door that was locked from the outside with a heavy deadbolt. Lily! I pounded on the wood. Lily! It's Grandpa! Grandpa? Her voice was small, broken, barely recognizable. Grandpa, please help me. I stepped back and kicked the door just below the lock. My knee exploded with pain, but the frame cracked. A second kick sent the deadbolt tearing through the wood. The door flew inward. The room had been designed to look like a guest bedroom. Expensive furniture, tasteful art, windows overlooking the lake. But the windows had been secured with screws from the outside. The door had that deadbolt, and my granddaughter sat huddled on the floor in a hospital gown, arms wrapped around herself, rocking back and forth. She looked up when I burst in, and my heart shattered into pieces. Lily had always been vibrant, energetic. She'd played varsity volleyball at Western, had graduated with honors, had lit up every room she entered. The woman in front of me was a ghost of that girl. She'd lost at least 30 pounds. Her hair hung limp and unwashed. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. But it was her arms that made my vision go red with rage. Precise puncture marks ran up both forearms in neat rows, some fresh, some scarred over. The pattern was too regular to be self-inflicted. Someone had done this to her, systematically, over weeks. Oh, sweetheart. I dropped to my knees beside her and gathered her into my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you. Shh, it's okay. I've got you. I'm getting you out of here. They won't let me leave. They'll say I'm crazy. They have documents, videos, doctors who'll say whatever they want. Footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets, heavy. I helped Lily to her feet. She was unsteady, weak, but she managed to stand with my arm around her. Jeffrey appeared in the doorway, shirt untucked, eyes bloodshot from alcohol. His brother Marcus flanked him, nearly identical, except for a scar on his chin. Behind them, their father William, gray-haired and distinguished, looking at me like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. Robert. William's voice was calm, almost amused, breaking and entering. Assault on my wife. Forced confinement charges won't help your granddaughter's case. Her case? Lily is mentally unstable. We've been trying to help her, but she resists treatment. The marks on her arms are self-inflicted. We have documentation, video evidence, professional assessments. She needs intensive care at one of our facilities. Those marks are injection sites. Self-medication. Jeffrey shrugged, like we were discussing the weather. She has a problem. We've tried to manage it privately. Keep it out of the press for her sake. But if you force our hand, we'll have to take more formal measures. 3 men blocking the exit. I was 62 with bad knees and 30 years since my last physical confrontation, but I had walked through worse to protect people I loved, and these men had hurt my granddaughter. I lifted Lily, shocked at how little she weighed, and walked straight toward them. Move. Jeffrey reached for her. I twisted away. Marcus grabbed my shoulder. I drove my elbow into his stomach with every ounce of strength I had. He doubled over, gasping. I kept moving, past them, down the hallway, down the stairs, Margaret was screaming about lawyers and police. William was shouting orders. I didn't stop until I had Lily in my car, and we were speeding away from that house of horrors. In my rearview mirror, the Harrington family stood in their doorway, backlit by their mansion, watching. They didn't pursue. They thought they'd already won. They thought their lawyers and their money and their connections would handle this the way they'd handled everything else. They were wrong. I drove straight to Toronto General Hospital. The emergency department at 4 in the morning was quiet enough that they took Lily immediately. A nurse with kind eyes and gentle hands led her back while I was forced to wait. I paced that waiting room for 2 hours, replaying everything in my head, cataloging everything I'd seen, building a case the way I'd built hundreds of cases over 3 decades. The doctor who finally emerged was a woman in her 40s, tired but sharp-eyed. "Mr. Thornton, I'm Dr. Patel. Your granddaughter is stable, but I have serious concerns. Tell me." The marks on her arms are consistent with regular injections over a period of weeks. Her blood work shows traces of benzodiazepines and antipsychotic medications. She shouldn't be on either without a legitimate prescription and careful monitoring. We've also found evidence of malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies consistent with food restriction. Someone was drugging her. That's what the evidence suggests. We've documented everything and reported it to the police. Someone from the Ontario Provincial Police should be here within the hour. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at 6:30. Sharp eyes, sensible suit, the kind of direct manner I'd always appreciated in law enforcement. "Mr. Thornton, I understand you were a Crown prosecutor. 31 years. Retired 3 years ago. Then you know I need your complete statement. Everything you saw, everything you heard." I told her all of it. The phone call, the locked room, the injection marks, the family's behavior, Margaret's words. She took detailed notes without any visible judgment. "This is enough for a warrant," she said when I finished. "But I should warn you, the Harringtons have connections. Their lawyers will fight this hard." "I know how to fight hard." "I believe you do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Thornton, I've been quietly investigating the Harrington facilities for 18 months. We believe there's a pattern of abuse, fraud, and potentially worse. Your granddaughter's testimony could be crucial. But building this case properly takes time and solid evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that proves systematic wrongdoing, that shows this wasn't isolated, that catches them in acts that can't be explained away by expensive lawyers." "How can I help?" She met my eyes. "You have skills and connections from your years as a prosecutor. You know how to investigate, how to find evidence, how to build cases. I can't officially ask you to do anything, but if you happen to uncover information that led us in productive directions, I wouldn't complain." The Harringtons were arrested that afternoon. Jeffrey, Margaret, William, and Marcus, all taken into custody. They were released on bail 6 hours later, their lawyers already spinning the narrative. My granddaughter was mentally ill. I was an overprotective grandfather, interfering in private family matters. The marks on her arms were self-inflicted. The drugs in her system were her own. I knew how this game was played. I'd played it from the other side for 3 decades. The key was evidence. Real evidence. The kind that couldn't be explained away or buried under legal motions. I started digging. James Park had been my investigator for 15 years when I was still prosecuting. He'd retired around the same time I did, but he still kept his hand in, consulting for law firms and taking private cases. I called him that night. "James, I need your help. I heard what happened. It's all over the news. What do you need?" "Everything you can find on the Harrington facilities. Financial records, former employees, patient complaints, regulatory filings. Anything that shows a pattern. That's a lot of ground to cover." "I know, but I have a feeling we're not the only ones they've hurt." I spent the next week doing what I did best. Investigating, cross-referencing, building connections between seemingly unrelated pieces of information. The Harrington facilities generated nearly $200 million annually across their 12 locations. All licensed, all accredited, all with spotless public records. But spotless records can be manufactured. I'd seen it before. James found the first crack 3 days in. A former nurse at the Harrington facility in Ottawa who'd been terminated after filing an internal complaint about medication practices. "Her name is Amanda Reeves," James said over the phone. "She claimed patients were being over-medicated, kept docile, and compliant. She filed a complaint with the College of Nurses. It was dismissed. Then she tried the Ministry of Health. That complaint disappeared too. She settled a wrongful termination suit with a non-disclosure agreement. Can you reach her? Already did. She's scared, Rob. They threatened her license, her career, her family. But she kept copies of everything. Records, emails, medication logs. She's been waiting for someone to actually listen. Amanda Reeves became my first witness. Over coffee at a Tim Hortons in Ottawa, she told me about the facility where she'd worked for 4 years. How patients who complained about their care suddenly developed new symptoms, requiring heavier medication. How families who asked too many questions were gradually pushed out of their loved ones' lives. How anyone who tried to report problems found their own records mysteriously developing issues. They have a system, she said, hands trembling around her coffee cup. It's not random, it's methodical. They identify vulnerable patients with money or insurance. They isolate them from family. Then they keep them medicated and compliant while they bill and bill and bill. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried. The local police chief's mother was a patient at one of their facilities, free of charge. He made it very clear that my complaint would not be taken seriously. The pattern repeated as I dug deeper. James found 7 more former employees willing to talk off the record. Each one told a similar story. Concerns raised internally were ignored. Complaints to regulatory bodies disappeared. Anyone who pushed too hard found themselves facing professional or legal threats. Then I found the deaths. 63 patients across the 12 Harrington facilities had passed away over the past 7 years. The number itself wasn't unusual for care facilities serving that population. But the timing was wrong. Too many had died shortly after family members raised concerns. Too many within weeks of filing complaints or requesting transfers. I contacted 28 families. Most hung up or refused to speak. But 6 agreed to share their stories, and what they told me made my blood run cold. A son in Hamilton, whose mother had died of an apparent medication overdose 3 weeks after he'd complained about suspicious charges on her bill. A daughter in Ottawa whose father had suffered a fatal fall the day after she'd requested his medical records. A husband in Montreal whose wife had passed away during a routine procedure after he'd threatened to contact the media about her treatment. Each family had sought answers. Each had been stonewalled by the facilities, by local authorities, by medical examiners who ruled every death accidental or natural. I documented everything, built timelines, mapped connections. The evidence pointed to something much larger than what had happened to Lily. The Harringtons weren't just abusing one patient. They were running a systematic operation that preyed on the vulnerable while silencing anyone who tried to expose them. 2 weeks into my investigation, I found the connection that changed everything. A name kept appearing in the margins of records, mentioned by former employees, referenced in deleted online reviews that James had managed to recover. Dr. Thomas Chen, a psychiatrist who had worked at the Harrington facility in Brampton for 6 years before his death. I looked up the details. Dr. Chen had died 18 months ago at his cottage in Gravenhurst. The coroner ruled it suicide. But when I found his widow's contact information and reached out, she told me a very different story. Thomas wasn't suicidal, Grace Chen said, her voice steady despite the grief I could hear underneath. He was angry. He'd seen things at that facility that horrified him. He was gathering evidence, preparing to go to the authorities. He told me he finally had enough to bring them down. What happened? He went to our cottage alone to organize his files, said it was safer to work away from home. They found him 3 days later. Her voice cracked. They said he took pills, but Thomas was allergic to opioids. He never would have touched them, and all his files were gone. His laptop, his notes, everything he'd collected. The police said there was no sign of forced entry, so it must have been suicide. Did he have backup copies anywhere? Silence for a moment. Then he had a storage unit. I've been too afraid to go there. Too afraid of what I might find. Too afraid of what might happen if I did. Mrs. Chen, if your husband found evidence of wrongdoing, it could help bring justice for him and protect others from the same fate. I know. I've known that for 18 months. I just couldn't do it alone. The storage unit was in Mississauga. Grace Chen met me there with a key she'd kept hidden for over a year. Inside, we found 12 boxes of documents, USB drives, printed emails, patient files with annotations, in Dr. Chen's handwriting highlighting irregularities, financial records showing payments to government inspectors, police officials, and a provincial court judge. Dr. Chen had documented everything: the fraudulent billing practices, the systematic over-medication of patients, the coordination between facility administrators and corrupt officials, the deaths that had been covered up. He'd known he was in danger. He'd left this evidence behind for someone to find. Now someone had. I spent 3 days reviewing the files, cross-referencing them with what I'd already gathered. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. The Harringtons hadn't just built a chain of care facilities. They'd built a criminal enterprise disguised as healthcare. They exploited vulnerable patients, defrauded insurance programs, and eliminated anyone who threatened to expose them. And they'd done it for years with complete impunity because they'd bought protection at every level. I called Detective Chen with what I'd found. "This is enough for federal involvement," she said after reviewing a summary of the evidence. "Insurance fraud across provincial lines, potential money laundering, obstruction of justice, RCMP, major crimes has been circling the Harringtons for 2 years without finding a way in. This gives them everything they need. When can we move?" "Not immediately. We need to verify the evidence, establish chain of custody, coordinate with federal prosecutors. If we rush this and make mistakes, their lawyers will tear the case apart." "How long?" "Weeks, maybe a month. People could die in a month, I know. But if we move too fast and they walk, they'll never be held accountable, and they'll know to cover their tracks better next time." She was right. I'd made the same calculations hundreds of times as a prosecutor. Justice required patience. It required procedure. It required building a case so solid that no amount of money or influence could destroy it. But patience was hard when my granddaughter still woke up screaming from nightmares. When I knew there were other victims still trapped in those facilities. When every day that passed was another day the Harringtons were free to hurt someone else. The threats started the day after I delivered the evidence to Detective Chen. A text from an unknown number. "We know what you found." A photo of my house taken from the street. Then, "Your granddaughter still has appointments scheduled. It would be a shame if she missed them." I screenshotted everything and forwarded it to Detective Chen. I also installed a security system, varied my routines, and started keeping a detailed log of every contact attempt. 30 years as a prosecutor had taught me how to protect myself, but it had also taught me that the best defense was a strong offense. The call came 3 weeks later. Detective Chen's voice was carefully neutral. "Mr. Thornton, we need to meet. Federal Building, tomorrow morning. The RCMP has a proposal." The conference room held Detective Chen, 2 RCMP officers, and a Crown prosecutor I'd worked with years ago named Michael Torres. "Robert," Torres said, "your evidence is strong enough to move forward with charges, but we have an opportunity to catch them in something bigger, something that would ensure they never see the outside of a prison." "What kind of opportunity?" "Our investigation has identified a pattern. When someone becomes a credible threat to the Harringtons, they deal with it personally, not through lawyers or intermediaries. Through direct action. You want to set a trap. We want to catch them committing a federal crime in real time, something their lawyers can't explain away." I understood immediately, and I felt sick. You want to use someone as bait, someone they perceive as a genuine threat, someone they'd want to handle themselves. "My granddaughter." Torres nodded slowly. "She's already on their radar. She's their greatest liability. If she appears to be cooperating with authorities, preparing to testify, they'll almost certainly try to neutralize that threat. You want me to put my granddaughter in danger. We want to give you both the opportunity to help end this permanently. With full protection, full surveillance, and teams ready to intervene the moment anything happens. Things can go wrong in seconds. They can. But your granddaughter has already expressed interest in helping. She wants to do this, Robert. She asked us to present the option to you." I stared at him. "She asked?" "She's been meeting with victim services, talking to other survivors we've identified. She knows there are people still in those facilities who need help. She doesn't want to just be a victim. She wants to fight back." The door opened. Lily walked in. She looked better than she had that night at the Harrington estate. She'd gained some weight, started seeing a therapist, begun the long process of recovery. But her eyes held something new. Determination, resolve. "Grandpa, I want to do this." "Lily, no. Absolutely not. You've been through enough. I know what I've been through. That's exactly why I need to do this." She sat down across from me. "There are other people in those facilities right now going through what I went through. If I can help stop it, I have to try. I can't lose you. You won't. But Grandpa, you taught me to stand up for what's right. You spent your whole career fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Let me do the same. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw Eleanor. That same fierce determination, that same refusal to back down from what was right no matter the cost. Eleanor had never let fear stop her from doing what needed to be done. Neither would her great-granddaughter. If anything happens to her, I said to Torres, I will hold everyone in this room personally responsible. Understood. The plan was set for the following week. Lily would attend a survivor support group meeting at a community center in Barrie. Openly, visibly. Word would be allowed to spread that she was preparing to testify, that she had information that could destroy the Harrington Empire. If the pattern held, they would try to stop her. Surveillance teams would be positioned at every exit. Tracking devices embedded in her clothing, undercover officers mixed into the gathering. The moment the Harringtons made a move, RCMP would close in. I spent the days leading up to the operation, unable to sleep. I reviewed the security protocols obsessively. I prayed for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. I questioned every choice that had led to this moment. The night of the operation, I hugged Lily at the door of my house. It's going to be fine, Grandpa. Call me when you get there, and when you leave, and every 15 minutes in between. She laughed, but her eyes were serious. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, sweetheart. Be safe. I watched her drive away with James, who'd insisted on accompanying her, and 2 plainclothes officers in the car behind them. The waiting was torture. 8:17 p.m. 15 minutes since they'd arrived at the community center. My phone buzzed. A photo of Lily entering the building, taken from across the street. Professional, deliberate. Then a text. Did you really think we weren't watching? My blood went cold. I called Detective Chen immediately. They took the bait. They're watching her. We see it. Stay calm. This is what we wanted. Teams are moving into position. 9:04 p.m. Another text, this time from James. Something's wrong. 2 men approached Elle. Claims to be facility staff with court order. Police taking her to safety. But those weren't real police. I knew it instantly. The Harringtons had people everywhere, including officers willing to help for the right price. Chen, they're impersonating police. They're taking her. We're tracking. Stay where you are, Robert. Do not interfere. 9:23 p.m. My phone rang. Unknown number. Looking for your granddaughter? The voice was smooth, satisfied. Jeffrey Harrington. If you hurt her, what? You'll prosecute me? You'll build a case? We own the people who would handle any case you could build. We own judges. We own police. We own the systems you spent your life believing in. What do you want? Everything you've collected. Every piece of evidence. Every copy. Bring it to our facility in Brampton. Alone. Tonight. Or your granddaughter experiences what real treatment looks like at a Harrington facility. Let me talk to her. A pause. Rustling. Then Lily's voice, small and terrified. Grandpa, don't come. Don't give them anything. I'm okay. I can handle. The line went dead. I sat in my car in the driveway, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to drive to Brampton immediately and tear that facility apart with my bare hands. But that's what they expected. That's what they were prepared for. An angry old man, acting on emotion, easy to handle, easy to discredit. I called Detective Chen. I got the call. They want me at the Brampton facility. We're already moving teams there. Robert, we need you to go. Bring the decoy evidence package we prepared. Make them think they've won. And Lily? Tracking shows she's at the facility. We have the building surrounded. The moment you're inside, the moment they admit to anything on record, we move. I drove to Brampton with a laptop bag full of carefully prepared fake evidence. The real files were already with federal prosecutors in Ottawa, copies secured in multiple locations. Even if the Harringtons took everything I brought, they'd be getting nothing that could help them. But my granddaughter was in their hands, and every kilometer of that drive felt like an eternity. The Brampton facility looked nothing like a prison. Modern architecture, manicured grounds, a sign out front promising healing and hope and professional care. The parking lot was empty at 10:30 at night, except for 3 expensive cars near the entrance. A guard met me at the door and led me through pleasant common areas that looked like a luxury hotel. Then we reached a service elevator. The basement level was different. Concrete floors, Fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask something darker. The guard opened a heavy door. Inside, Lily sat in a chair, hands zip-tied behind her back. James was beside her, similarly restrained, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. A woman I didn't recognize sat in the corner, crying silently. Geoffrey Harrington leaned against a table in the center of the room, drink in hand. His mother Margaret stood near the back, perfectly composed. His father William, flanked by brother Marcus, blocked the only exit. "Robert." William's voice was almost friendly. "You brought what we requested?" I held up the laptop bag. "Everything." Geoffrey took it, started reviewing the files on a tablet. "This is everything? All the copies?" "All of them." "Good." William stepped forward. "Here's what happens now. We destroy these files. Then you and Mr. Park have an unfortunate accident. Your granddaughter returns to our care, too traumatized and unstable to provide reliable testimony. Everything goes back to normal. You can't keep getting away with this." "We've been getting away with it for 20 years, Geoffrey laughed. "What makes you think tonight is different?" "Because tonight you're being recorded." The lights went out. Emergency red lighting kicked in. Then William's own voice echoed from speakers mounted in the ceiling. "Your granddaughter returns to our care, too traumatized and unstable to provide reliable testimony." "What did you do?" Margaret's voice was ice. The door exploded inward. RCMP tactical officers poured through, weapons drawn, shouting orders. "RCMP, nobody move." Geoffrey dropped his tablet. Marcus and William were face down on the concrete within seconds. Margaret stood frozen, that perfect composure finally cracking. Detective Chen entered wearing tactical gear. "Margaret Harrington, Geoffrey Harrington, William Harrington, Marcus Harrington, you're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, fraud, and murder. You have the right to retain and instruct counsel." I crossed to Lily as officers cut her restraints. She fell into my arms, shaking. "You came. You actually came. I'll always come for you, sweetheart. Always." RCMP Inspector Torres appeared beside us. "Your granddaughter's courage made this possible, Mr. Thornton. Without her willingness to help, they might have walked. She saved lives tonight." Lily looked up at him. "There are others? In the facilities?" "Teams are moving on all 12 locations simultaneously. Everyone will be evaluated and properly cared for." Over Lily's shoulder, I watched officers lead the Harringtons away in handcuffs. Margaret's face was still cold, but her eyes held something I'd seen in countless courtrooms over my career. The dawning realization that money and connections couldn't save her this time. The trials took 14 months. Media coverage was relentless. The evidence we'd gathered, combined with Dr. Chen's files and testimony from dozens of survivors and former employees, created a case that even the Harringtons' army of lawyers couldn't dismantle. I attended every day of proceedings, watching the family that had hurt my granddaughter finally face justice. The verdicts came down on a gray Thursday in March. Margaret Harrington, life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The judge listed her crimes methodically: conspiracy, racketeering, direct responsibility for 7 deaths. Someone in the gallery sobbed with relief. William Harrington, life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 20 years. His face went gray as the judge spoke. He'd be well into his 90s before he had any chance of freedom. Geoffrey Harrington, 25 years for assault, kidnapping, and conspiracy. He'd be approaching 60 before he saw the outside of a prison. I felt no satisfaction watching his smug expression finally crack. Marcus Harrington, 18 years for assault and aiding criminal organization. The corrupt officials followed. Police Chief Hendricks, 12 years. Inspector Morrison, 9 years. Judge Patterson, 15 years for obstruction of justice and corruption. The Harrington facilities were shut down. All 12 locations, assets seized. A $40 million victim compensation fund was established. 83 survivors came forward. Every single one received a settlement and access to proper care. The case triggered federal investigations into long-term care regulation across the country. New oversight requirements were implemented. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. It didn't fix everything. Nothing ever does. But it helped. Lily started a support organization for survivors of institutional abuse 6 months after the trials ended. She works with families navigating the care system, helping them identify warning signs, understand their rights, advocate for their loved ones. I attended the organization's first public meeting, sat in the back, and watched my granddaughter help other survivors find their voices. That's when I knew I'd finally kept my promise to Eleanor. 8 months after the verdicts, a letter arrived. Prison mail. Jeffrey Harrington's name on the return address. You think you've won. But this isn't over. My family has resources you can't imagine. Connections that reach further than you know. When I get out, and I will get out, I'll make sure you and your precious granddaughter experience exactly what you put my family through. And this time, there won't be any RCMP to save you. I photographed the letter, front and back. Sent copies to the Crown Prosecutor's Office, the RCMP, and Jeffrey's parole board. Then I filed the original in my evidence cabinet. Let him threaten. Every word he wrote just added more time to his sentence and made his eventual parole hearing that much less likely to succeed. 23 years as a prosecutor had taught me that criminals who can't stop threatening people never actually learn to control themselves. That evening, Lily called. Grandpa. Someone reached out through the organization. Her mother is at a private care facility in British Columbia. She says the things she's describing sound exactly like what we went through with the Harringtons. I pulled out my laptop and started a new file. Added the facility name, the contact's information, began the preliminary research. I'm 62 years old. My knees ache constantly. I get tired earlier than I used to, and I sometimes have to read documents 3 times before the words stick. When I look in the mirror, I see an old man with gray hair and deep lines carved by decades of fighting battles most people don't even know exist. But I also see someone who knows how to investigate, how to build cases, how to find the truth hidden behind expensive lawyers and respectable facades. I see someone who made a promise to his wife and kept it, even when keeping it meant putting everything he loved at risk. Lily is safe. Lily is strong. Lily is helping others survive what she survived. And there are more people out there who need help. More families being destroyed by predators, hiding behind the veneer of legitimate business. More corruption disguised as care. So I can't stop. I won't stop. Looking back on this story, I see a grandfather who almost lost everything because I didn't trust my instincts when they mattered most. I saw the warning signs with Jeffrey Harrington from the beginning. The charm that felt practiced. The smile that didn't reach his eyes. The family business that was just a little too successful. A little too clean. I knew something was wrong, but I second-guessed myself because I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to interfere in my granddaughter's happiness. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until someone you love calls you at midnight, trapped and terrified, before you act on what your gut is telling you. There are lessons I learned from this experience that I want to share with you, things I wish someone had told me before I learned them the hard way. First, trust is earned through consistent actions over time. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Pay attention to how people treat those who can't fight back, how they respond when things don't go their way, what they do when they think no one is watching. Character reveals itself in small moments, long before it manifests in crisis. Second, evil often hides behind respectability. The Harringtons had wealth, status, community recognition. They served on charity boards and sponsored local events, and looked like exactly the kind of people you'd want your loved ones to be connected with. But their success was built on exploitation and suffering. Never assume that money or position equals morality. Some of the worst predators I prosecuted were people their communities considered pillars of respectability. Third, institutions can fail. Systems designed to protect the vulnerable can be corrupted, captured by the very people they're supposed to oversee. Don't assume that because something is licensed and accredited and approved by authorities that it's safe. Do your own research. Ask hard questions. Trust but verify, always. Fourth, age doesn't diminish your ability to make a difference. At 62, I could have told myself I was too old to fight this battle, too tired to take on powerful people with unlimited resources. But experience is a weapon. Knowledge is power. The skills you develop over a lifetime don't disappear just because your knees hurt. If anything, age gives you perspective that younger people lack. Don't ever let anyone, including yourself, tell you that you're too old to stand up for what's right. Fifth, and most importantly, never stop fighting for the people you love. When Eleanor died, I made her a promise. I didn't know then how hard keeping that promise would be or how much it would cost. But I kept it. And I'll keep fighting until I can't fight anymore, because that's what love requires. Not just feeling it, but acting on it, even when action is terrifying and difficult and uncertain. These stories I share aren't just entertainment. They're proof that ordinary people, armed with determination and truth, can take down systems that seem invincible. The Harringtons had money and power and connections at every level of authority. They'd operated for 20 years with complete impunity, and they were brought down by survivors who refused to stay silent, by investigators who wouldn't give up, by a justice system that, despite its flaws, still works when enough people demand that it work. So here's my advice, from an old prosecutor who's seen both the best and the worst of what people can do. Be vigilant. Trust your instincts. Ask questions when something doesn't feel right. Document everything. And when you see injustice, when you know something is wrong, when someone you love is in danger, act. Don't wait. Don't hope someone else will handle it. Don't assume the system will protect you. I'm still fighting. Still taking calls from families who need help. Still investigating facilities and organizations that prey on the vulnerable. Still keeping the promise I made to Eleanor. Don't be like me and wait until it's almost too late. Be better, be faster, be braver, and never forget that one person, armed with truth and determination, can change everything.